Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to learn more about what it means for your company to commit to hiring returning citizens. I'm TV Britton, and I'm the Workforce Development Project Manager with Talent 2025. Just a second. Today is the second of 3 webinar sessions Talent 2025 will be hosting on the topic. Our conversations today will focus on the proper evaluation of criminal histories and starting the process to expanding your talent pool. We'll start today by introducing the topic and lightly recapping some of the content from the last session, which focused on banning the box on the initial job application. I will keep it brief so I can introduce you to the employers and their insights as soon as possible. We will end with some time for Q&A and a reminder for our upcoming and final session of the series in September. In the meantime, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat box as they come to you. And as a final housekeeping item, please mute yourself if you aren't already. Talent 2025's mission is to make West Michigan a top 20 region for talent by the year 2025. We are a CEO-led organization, and one area of focus for us is workforce development. Within our workforce development working group, we focus on addressing and reducing several systemic barriers, one of which is being a formally incarcerated individual or having a criminal background. Our Returning Citizens Committee has 3 objectives to reduce this barrier. First is to increase the number of employers committed to hiring returning citizens and elevate the voice of business champions. Second is to raise awareness and highlight best practices for employers committed to hiring returning citizens. And finally, we hope to increase the number of individuals exiting prison with a state-issued ID, making them more employment ready. The purpose of the webinar series is to educate and support employers regarding hiring returning citizens by sharing relevant laws, appropriate hiring guidelines, and the successful strategies and failures of other employers who have experience in this area. To those familiar with the 2017 Community of Practice held by Talent 2025, this is a further practical extension of that content. In July, we covered banning the box. Today, we will focus on individual assessment of criminal history, and then in September 25th, we will have our final webinar series or final webinar session, and we'll talk about retention and success for non-traditional employees. Let's recap some information about the labor market. Unemployment is low in West Michigan. The graph on the left shows that West Michigan averages 3.4% unemployment, with Ottawa County having the lowest rate at 2.8%. The comparison chart on the right shows us a slow and steady increase in labor force participation rates. So the situation remains, unemployment is low, talent is hard to find, and more people continue to enter the labor force. Yet we know up to 75% of returning citizens remain unemployed a year after they return home, and they also generally experience much higher unemployment rates. Employment is an essential tool for successful reentry after incarceration, and formerly incarcerated individuals are a source of reliable and hardworking talent. So in a survey conducted by the Society for Human Resource Management, almost half of employers, or 44%, said they would flatly reject candidates who did not divulge past convictions on their job applications if those convictions were then revealed during a background check. Almost as many employers, 39%, said they would give candidates an opportunity to explain the convictions. So liability is often cited as a concern when hiring returning citizens, yet data shows that negligent hiring liability is not a considerable risk for employers engaged in fair chance hiring, particularly if the employers follow state law and the EEOC guidance of individualized assessment. A SHRM study concluded that no research has shown that workplace violence is generally attributed to employees who are ex-offenders, or that hiring ex-offenders is causally linked to increased workplace violence. So let's take a further look at the labeling of crimes and what is considered a felony. Felonies include drawing on insufficient funds in an amount greater than $500 or writing a bad check, forging a signature on a check, perjury, adultery, providing false car insurance information, and possession of a stolen license plate, just to provide a few examples. So in the same SHRM study, the overwhelming majority of surveyed employers expressed concern over felony convictions related to crimes of violence at 93%, and theft and dishonesty at 90%, followed by drug offenses at 70%, and various misdemeanors and driving infractions. So there is real employer concern. However, what the labeling of crimes for correctional statistics does not tell anyone, not the public, not policymakers, not employers, is whether someone will engage in the same behavior or another destructive behavior in the future. So employment actually reduces the likelihood of recidivism. When should we ask about a criminal history? Some employers inquire about a criminal history after they extend a provisional offer of employment, and some employers choose to address the question of criminal history when interviewing the finalists for a position. Either way, the inquiry should accompany an individualized assessment to determine if the applicant's criminal history is relevant. Individualized assessment is the key. So the goal is to only exclude applicants with a criminal history that is related, that is job related to the position and consistent with the employer's business necessity. So how do you know? Individualized assessment generally means that an employer informs the individual that he or she may be excluded because of past criminal conduct, provides an opportunity to the individual to demonstrate that the exclusion does not properly apply to him, and considers whether the individual's additional information shows that the policy as applied is not job related and consistent with business necessity. The EEOC has guidelines for hiring individuals with a criminal history. They recommend to consider the nature and gravity of the offense, the time that has passed since the offense and or completion of the sentence, and the nature of the job held or sought. So if an applicant is excluded by this screen, an employer can then provide an applicant with the opportunity for individualized assessment to determine whether the exclusion is job related for the position in question and consistent with business necessity. The nature and gravity of the offense or conduct speaks to whether a specific crime could be relevant to concerns about risks in the specific position. For example, theft might be a disqualifier for a position as a bank teller. So how far should the look back period be when considering the time that has passed? Consider this. Most repeat arrests occur within 3 years of the first conviction. And after 4 to 7 years, the risk of recidivism is greatly reduced. Based on this, some common look-back periods might include 5, 7, and or 10 years for serious crimes of violence or dishonesty, and 2 or 3 years for less serious crimes. A criminal conviction should disqualify a job applicant only when they are, a criminal conviction should disqualify a job applicant only when there is a connection between the nature of the conviction and the nature of the job. So 4 points to consider about the nature of the job. Specific job duties, like whether it be interaction with vulnerable people or data entry. The essential functions of the job. The circumstances under which the job is performed, like the level of supervision or the regularity of feedback. And finally, where the job is performed, whether it be outdoors or in private homes, for example. To summarize the best practices, first is ask later. Consider only convictions that are relevant to the job in question. Establish an appropriate look-back period and conduct individual assessment. All right, I think that covers the background information for evaluating criminal histories. Allow me to introduce you to our employers. Today, I'm joined by Tracy Sanchez, Talent Resource Partner for Express Employment Professionals, and Lisa Gavranovich, Director of Human Resources for Zeeland Lumber and Supply. So welcome. And why don't we get started with you, Tracy? Can you tell us about Express Employment Professionals, your commitment to hiring returning citizens, and what your process is for individualized assessment?
Certainly. So I'm Tracy, and I've been with Express Employment Professionals for just 21 years. Celebrated that this last month.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, and so I've had the honor and privilege of working with Janice Petrini, who purchased the Grand Rapids Express Employment Professionals branch about 24 years ago. When she purchased this company, she had a heart and commitment to impact our community and change people's lives. With that commitment and passion, she opened her doors and began to serve our community with a heart for change, with a philosophy that we all win when we help people move past barriers and provide ability to care for themselves and their families. I was in a meeting recently where we were discussing hiring practices for reentering citizens, and it was said to think about it like this. If we all had to put on an application our very worst day ever and had to talk about that day every single time we applied for a new job, and to be judged on that situation even before they had an opportunity to learn about our skills and our circumstances around that issue, and where would we all be with that? With over 70 million individuals having something on their record and with less than 3% unemployment in our community, we really can't afford to not consider this talent pool. At Express Employment Professionals, we are recruiting for many different companies. That puts us in a unique position, sometimes a disadvantage to a certain degree. We are required to work within our clients' policies and hiring procedures regarding convictions and background policies. However, we're always working to educate and advocate to the community partners for this talent pool. Some of the ways that we've been able to help our clients see past the conviction is by sharing the individual stories as well as their time frame of the conviction and offense. The structure of Express Employment Professionals is to interview with a focus on skills, abilities, passions, and goals. We encourage our clients to do the same. We've seen some amazing stories of lives transformed through this approach. One of my favorite stories was from several years ago. There was a gentleman that I met who was in a halfway house after getting out of prison for a felony DUI. In order to get out of the housing, he had to get a job. So prior to this conviction, he was a high-level executive in a manufacturing facility. But with a felony now, he found it hard to even get a basic production job. We called one of our clients that normally had a pretty strict policy on felonies, but it was in the same industry that he had been in with his previous employer. We shared his skills, his experience, and then his story. He had been going through a difficult time. His drinking had gotten out of control. He made a series of bad decisions that led to his felony conviction. He completed rehab, had a great support system, and was committed to staying in recovery to move past this season in his life. Being that this was the same industry he had been in for several years, we were able to get him into a lower level quality technician position. Fast forward a year later, he had actually moved his way back up into a high level management position and became the operations manager. In that, he stayed in that role for about 5 years. This was about 15 years ago. Since then, he's moved on and up in his career, celebrating sobriety. From time to time, we'll hear from him. He refers friends, family. He's used this as a staffing firm to hire for his company. We have many more stories like this. Statistics show that the odds of someone reoffending is much greater without employment. When we open our minds and our doors, we as a community win in this area.
Thank you. I have a question. So how at Express Employment Professionals do you consider the time that has passed when assessing criminal histories?
Certainly. Well, there's two sides to that. Generally, we look at the time passed the same as the person just getting out. Generally, the newly returning citizen has a strong desire to start their life off on a good foot. And then there's also, they're on probation, they have parole, there's a lot of accountability. So in that particular case, we find that person to be really reliable, someone that we can count on to be at work, really motivated to do a good job. And then we also look at the time passed. When you've got someone who's been, the time frame has passed, maybe I would say even 3 to 5 years, you start to see that they've been staying employed, they've got good references, then this is a person they're on the right path. So we look at both sides of that.
Okay. And what does it look like for Express Employment Professionals to do an inquiry into a background?
So we automatically pull up Otis, which everybody can do. We run backgrounds client specific. So we have companies that ask us to run statewide or nationwide. We do it custom to that. It is not a blanket thing that we do, but we do make sure that we're checking all of the resources. If someone's a returning citizen, we get their probation officer, phone numbers. We have, if they're in support, if there's somebody that we need to connect with, if they're CAP, those different programs. So we have all.
Can you tell us what CAP is?
Yep. That's a program for people that it's sort of like a halfway house. They're coming in and then they have to report in. They're almost like a work release type thing.
Okay.
So in order for them to be able to go to work, they're monitored as far as what time they can leave to get to work. And if there's a change in their schedule, the CAP representative will call us and check in with us. So we have all that information. So we're monitoring with them that new returning citizen too. But as far as the backgrounds, it's pretty customized to our clients.
Okay, it's customized on the client. And then what's the decision-making process regarding convictions? At Express, what is the decision-making process regarding convictions?
Oh, sure. So we like to first get to know that individual and interview them, learn about their skills and their passion, what we can do with that. And then, of course, we're in a unique situation. So when I identify someone that matches the skill set of a certain client, if there's a possible barrier to their background, I'll explain to the associate, you know, this company does do an extensive background check. Is there something that I need to know about that's going to come up on your background? Usually they're really transparent because we've built a rapport. They're ready to tell me. Not always. I mean, there's sometimes people will still lie. But for the most part, if we get that, and then I'll say, okay, we'll run your background. We'll see what happens. And but I advocate for them when we're talking to our client. If they've got a great skill set, and even though I know, just like that story that I was just sharing with the gentleman, they had a firm policy, no felonies, but they gave him a chance.
Yeah.
And so usually that's our approach, is to interview for skills and then try to work the best we can with what that individual's past is.
Okay, and advocating if needed.
Absolutely.
Okay. So what are some traits that you look for when you're hiring someone?
So we're looking for someone with obviously relevant skills, especially since we're trying to match them to the clients and companies we serve. Good attendance habits, good communication, self-directed, good deductive reasoning skills, pretty much the standard stuff that everybody's looking for, that A candidate. And, you know, we see this in our returning citizens. We do.
So when it comes to doing individual assessments around criminal history or evaluating criminal history for fit for the job, what has been the most significant change in your process?
Well, I think it's a mind shift to begin with. You know, you start to think about, what does this person bring to the table? And then we assess the background. And but I feel like it is definitely a mind shift. When I first got into this business, didn't know a lot about that community. I just came from a completely different industry. And so there was a little bit of like, ooh, I don't know. And the more I became educated, the more I understood. It was truly a mind shift. And I think that was the biggest thing. And then moving into then understanding the circumstances and the story of that individual, because that also makes a difference. And our convictions are really blanket. They're basic. Like, there's so many layers to what that charge or conviction is, that just because someone has this doesn't mean they did what we think they did. So when we know the story, that also helps us to be a good support to them.
It helps you not only evaluate their criminal history, but understand the nuance that goes into it as well. So when you are advocating for them with a different client that maybe you think is not going to accept this individual for employment, you could change their mind.
Exactly.
With that information.
Exactly.
Right. Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. We are going to go on and speak to Lisa G. from Zealand Lumber. So Lisa, can you just go ahead and tell us a little bit about your story, your experience hiring returning citizens, and what it is that Zealand Lumber does for individual assessment?
Sure. Yep. So my name's Lisa Gavranovich. I've been with Zealand for about 2 years. And when I joined, we had already been hiring from the returning citizen population, but there was not really a structured process or kind of steps of the hiring process. And that made me a little bit nervous because I was afraid there was some inconsistency. So I was fortunate enough that our president had partnered with Talent 2025 and got me on board with this group right away to kind of share some best practices. Zealand's also a member of the Source, and they had a lot of resources for us, and a lot of employers there also hire from the returning citizen population. So I was able to partner with some real strategic HR leaders to to pick their brains about what their best practices were. So we came up with a process of how we would work through and evaluate each of the candidates that was a returning citizen. So we start with, reviewing the application. We have a recruiter that does a pre-screen and asks just some basic questions about their background and their experience. If they checked, we still do have the box on our application. However, we've chosen underneath to put, and I should have wrote down the exact words, but something like checking the box does not disqualify you from a position. We appreciate your honesty, because our tagline is build trust. We build trust with our clients. We build trust with our community, and we want to build trust with our team members as well. So when the recruiter's meeting with them, she'll just ask, well, I see you checked yes. I don't need all the details right now, but thank you for your honesty, and we'll continue on in the interviewing process. They'll meet with the supervisor, and then if the supervisor likes them, we'll make them an offer contingent on a background check and a drug test. So the recruiter will then call them if she knows they had a background or had checked yes for a felony conviction, and say, when your background check comes back, you'll just do a quick half-hour conversation with our director of human resources or our manager. So we put together just quick 8 questions regarding their background and kind of walk through the different pieces of it. So I don't know if you want me to go into depth there, but
Sure. What are the 8 pieces? I'd like to hear them.
I didn't bring all of the, I should have brought all 8 questions.
That's okay.
Share that later, but first I just explained to them like why I'm asking these questions, and I also explained to them our tagline of build trust and how it's really important, and that I'm very understanding of what happened. I just need them to be honest. And I understand, like you discussed earlier, they're probably sharing one of the worst things that happened to them in their lives, and that I'm not there to judge or pass any judgment. I'm just there to understand, and I share that I have a responsibility to make sure that our team members are in a safe work environment and surrounded by people that want to live by our core values, work hard, serve our customers, be dependable, have good attendance. Like, that's what I'm looking for. So we start by kind of walking through each of their felony convictions. We don't specifically look at any period of time, primarily because I guess most often we've just had a lot of people right out of prison or who have been repeat offenders. And I just seek to understand, why did they repeat offend? And I look for someone who's humble and takes ownership for their actions, and who's not blaming others or saying it was this person's fault, or I didn't actually do that, or it wasn't me. Because I feel like if you can take some personal ownership for that time of your life, to me, that shows growth and that you're trying to move forward and do better and start over.
Yeah. How do you factor in the time that has passed since the offense or sentence, or that's something that you don't factor in?
I think if someone has habitually been in and out and in and out and in and out, I would just talk through them about that. I found most often the reason why they're in and out and in and out and in and out is because they couldn't find something to occupy their time, such as a job, because they couldn't find employment, and then went back to their old ways because they had kids to feed, or a mom who was sick, or they were living in the streets and wanted to, have a place to stay. And so I try to be as open-minded as possible. And then what I like to focus more on is, okay, well, what's your support system look like now? How long have you been sober? How are you working your programs? Is it court ordered, or are you still choosing to go on your own? What do you do if you think you're gonna, get in trouble or get yourself in trouble? Do you have somebody you can call, and what does that look like? And then I also share.
It's almost like, and the term safety planning comes to mind, but I don't think it's quite safety planning, but it's just planning, saying, we understand this is your criminal history. We accept this. You're completely employable at Zeeland Lumber, but how can we make sure that we're setting you up for success?
Correct. Absolutely. So I had mentioned before, we partner with a source, and there's a success excuse me, a success coach that comes on site to our location at Wyoming. It's essentially, and our Zeeland location, it's essentially an extension of our HR team, but what our team members talk to Anne Marie about is 100% confidential. And we tell every single person we interview and employ about the source, but I spend a particular amount of time talking to our returning citizens about it, primarily because they've helped many of them get out of the cap housing, and in apartments. There's a huge shortage of them in Grand Rapids. And then if you have a felony conviction, is challenging. If you have a felony conviction for a CSC, it's almost impossible to find somewhere to live. So the source helps them, plus has grant monies, plus Anne Marie just has a wealth of knowledge and connections in the community of people that can help all of our team members, but also people with felony convictions. We do Wheels to Work program. We have a nurse on staff through our health benefits. So I tell them kind of about all the ways we'll support them. And then I also make sure they all have my cell phone number. And if they have any issues with their parole officer, or if they're on a tether or have issues with counseling, their counselor letting them come to work, to call me and I'll help them out with that as well.
That's great. So, at the source is a great resource, and not to go to belabor that point too much, but just to understand that there's 3 things that are required for successful reentry. Employment's only one of them, housing is another, and social support. So when you're able to provide a little bit of a wraparound service, even though it's not the employer providing it, but they're providing access to it, or kind of illuminating how a returning citizen could benefit from those, I think that's really helpful. So it's going a little bit deeper. It's kind of touching into the content that we're going to touch into in September, but it's almost like if you're going to go through the individual assessment process, you should also go into some of that planning so that you set everybody up for success, whether they're a returning citizen or not.
Yeah, anybody can go see the source. Yeah. So I think probably one of my favorite stories is a team member that we had who joined us who'd been incarcerated. And when he joined Zeeland, he didn't have a driver's license. He hadn't had one in years. And he has, I think, 3 small children and a wife. And he worked with the source to make the necessary payments and arrangements and all the things he needed to do to get his driver's license back. And he was so proud to come into work and share with his team that he got to drive his family to the grocery store that weekend, instead of having to take the bus. And for me, that's very humbling, because it's the little things that can sometimes make the greatest impact. And I think many of us take for granted the fact that we hop on our car and drive wherever we want on the weekends to get all our stuff done and schlep our kids all over the place and don't think twice of it. So I think that, was really humbling for me, that something as simple as driving to the grocery store, made his day.
Yeah, I think that's great. So, at Talent 2025, this is our own personal interest, but that's one of our objectives in our Returning Citizens Committee, is to increase the number of individuals who have a state-issued ID when they're leaving corrections facilities, because not only does it increase their employability, but then if you have a need for housing, transportation, something like that, and you have a state-issued ID, you have better access to social support. So,
and the source helps them with that too. So it's that partnership's amazing.
We have a lot of community partners that we work with too, just because we know that some of the barriers that keep people from being able to go to work, being reliable, it's housing, it's daycare, it's transportation. So regardless of returning citizen or not, those are barriers a lot of people face, but especially that population, because they're coming back and starting their lives over again. Some of them are in this community alone. They have no family here because they were released from,
and they're not allowed to go anywhere else.
Right. So now they're on probation or parole in this community, and they have no support system. So we should have someone in our office that's dedicated to building relationships with community partners, and her entire job is to build that bridge. And so she'll go out and say, okay, we have people that might need this resource, they might need that resource. And so we have a resource board in our office, and then we have it in our computer as well. We connect people to wherever they need to go to get those tools. So part of the time when we're interviewing, because we're spending probably about 2 hours with the individuals when they come into our office to meet with them and interview with them, and we're trying to understand what barriers they're facing. And then we work to try to remove those barriers, whether it be telling their story, whether it be pointing them to resources for housing. We have community partners in our community that are in the property management sector. So we're able to connect them sometimes to that and write references on their employment to help them be able to get a place to live.
Yeah,
And
writing a
so
reference could be really critical.
it can be. And, if they've proven themselves to go to work every day, they're reliable, the company is singing their praise, then we can go ahead and back that up and say, yeah, this is a stable job and employment situation. This person is going to be able to pay their rent. Give them a chance.
Yeah.
We have a couple of property managers. They just shoot me a text like, does this person work there? How are they doing? Or am I good to rent them a place? I'm like, yeah, they're fine. Yeah.
That's great.
Well, because we've built that trust in the community too, to say like, yeah, this person's got a job and yep, they've been working for this long and they've been doing great. And
which is important to like a private landlord or a landlord in general. So that's a good connection in a really unique way that an employer can come in and be an advocate. And today, of course, we're focusing on returning citizens, but these barriers are really experienced by far more than just returning citizens.
absolutely.
Understanding the employability of formerly incarcerated individuals, and then understanding that their needs are not far different from another individual. So still connecting them in the way that you would someone who didn't have a criminal history.
Exactly.
Okay, so I appreciate all that you guys have offered so far, but we are at about 12:30. So I'm going to see if there are any questions in the chat box. I think there's one. So it says, can you tell us what your healthcare clients do in regards to individual assessment? I'm assuming this is for you, Tracy. Yeah. And what are their process for them?
Well, we're really not in that space at Express. We don't do anything in the healthcare sector. So as far as connecting with a person-to-person kind of caregiver type stuff, we're not in that. We have done some administrative things, and actually I do know, though, I'm on some boards, and there's some other healthcare companies that are on those boards that are opening their doors to this practice as well.
I was going to say Zealand doesn't do that either, but I'm on the board at the Source, and I know that there's healthcare there, and a couple of those employers hire returning citizens. I don't know the specifics of their process, but our contact information on there, we can make the connection
for sure.
That'd be great. That has been a repeat question. I'm hoping that we will be able to get representation from the healthcare industry on the third webinar. So hopefully we can answer some of these questions, because I know it's its own kind of sticky situation. I'm not fully aware of all the ins and outs, but I'm not an HR professional.
That industry is regulated. So
Right,
I think that's probably part of the challenge, is that what are their expectations for someone's background? You'd have to compare that to what your process would be, would be my understanding.
So that they still have opportunity, though, to apply some of the practices that we are, to be able to open that door a little wider. Applying that, how does the past history apply to the skills and the job needed? I mean, if you have someone going into someone's home, then, if there's theft, you might be wondering maybe this, or, but again, the time frame would matter, right? But I think if you've got all this compliance stuff that you're working with, and it's not really my space, I don't feel like I should.
We're not the experts in that.
Yeah, for sure.
I will reach back out to both of you then post this webinar to try to make some of those connections, so that maybe we can address healthcare directly in September.
We can talk about logistics and manufacturing.
And some admin.
Let's see if we have any more. Are there any other questions out there? I will go ahead and unmute my computer and see if anybody has some questions they just want to ask. Maybe I won't be able to. No, sorry. If you have a question, there's still the chat box up at the top. I have a few additional questions. So just speaking in generalities, what additional words can you offer to help employers understand just how employable formerly incarcerated individuals are?
Well, I mean, I can say that we've had countless stories of people that have become amazing contributors to their companies that came from this population. There's a bit of a stigma that when you hire someone who's a re-entering citizen, that there's going to be a higher risk of violence, or there's going to be a higher risk of theft, or there's going to be a higher risk of some kind of, imbalance in your work environment. But really, statistics are proving that that's an unfounded bias, and that a lot of the things that are happening in the workplace that are under those categories are by people that are not re-entering citizens. Correct. And so I think that if my advice in that area is to open up your mind and to look at the individual, assess them, be knowledgeable about who they are, but consider them for what they bring to the table and not the label that our society has put on them.
Yeah, that's great. And what about you?
I mean, I would say a lot of the same things. A lot of them are just looking to restart their lives. And we have 30 returning citizens in our organization right now. We have an overall population of 400. So, we've embraced it. A lot of these people, we share with them how they've grown, how they've been promoted, and to the point, their turnover is lower than turnover of non-returning citizens.
Yep.
And they're, very dedicated, reliable, hardworking. And we ask a lot of those questions in the interview process too. Like, what did you do while you were incarcerated? Did you have jobs?
Okay.
You can get fired from a job in prison. I didn't know that when I first started this, but I asked that question because you can actually get fired from a job. So, we ask a lot of those questions to see, did you volunteer on any committees or, anything in prison? And a lot of those people have brought amazing skill sets and backgrounds and have helped, I think, other team members in our organization that maybe just needed a compass or someone to help them focus as well. So
what I'm kind of hearing is that some of those character traits that are important to employers, like being dedicated, hardworking, loyal, those aren't character traits that stop during incarceration. There are questions you can ask that can even show the continuation of that during incarceration, which really, to me, is additionally character building. To think that you were in such a trying circumstance and were still true to your values.
One of the things too, there's been a shift, with the generations and coming into the workforce, and sometimes some of the, boomers will say, "I just want someone who's grateful to have a job," and I have found that this population is exactly that. Doesn't matter what age they are; they're just so grateful for an opportunity to work and be able to start their life over again. If they have a family, they get to step back into their roles and to be proud that they're contributing to their families. It's a really rewarding thing when you can look at somebody's life and see that you had a piece of that puzzle to be able to bring them to the next level in their life.
Yeah.
I think additionally, they're just looking for clear expectations, right? So they've been in a pretty structured environment. So now what do I do while I'm here?
Okay.
And so something I had, thought of when I was doing this is I end each of my interviews with them by saying my expectations are that you work safely, have good attendance, communicate with your leader, use all the resources we talked about, but more importantly, make me proud.
Yeah.
So my dad always has said that to me my entire life, like, make me proud. It sticks. It gives me the warm fuzzies. It makes me think somebody cares about me. And I can't tell you how many of these guys have come back and said, "I hope I'm making you proud.
Oh, I love that.
Here, Lisa, I hope I'm making you proud. I'm making you proud today. We met our goals." And so obviously sticking with somebody else as well. And if it's just like that little thing that helps that person want to show up every day, like, it's totally worth it for me to close the interviews that way. So.
Yeah. Well, I think that's great. I think we can close on that. So thank you. I feel like I've learned a lot today, so I really appreciate it. Like I said, I'm not an HR individual, so I really look forward to learning more about what it means to hire a returning citizen, especially as Talent 2025 advocates for hiring returning citizens. Not only are we interested in companies committing to it, but we're interested in the process and what it means on a day-to-day basis. So I appreciate that. Let's see. I'm just going to check the chat box one more time before we move on. Nope, I don't see anything else. So before we end for the day, please take some time to reflect on the content. What is your company's process to individual assessment of criminal histories? Does this increase your talent pool? And why did you join this webinar? So please submit answers or questions to Tammy Britton on the email on the screen, and watch for a follow-up survey to help us provide useful and relevant material. And a reminder about our final upcoming webinar session on September 25. We will explore retention and success for non-traditional employees, including returning citizens. So thanks for spending part of your day with us, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you.